Uncle Mark.
What?
Despite our best efforts in this podcast week after week, there are still people who are qualified in the fields they endeavor in that want to talk to us.
I know, it's balderdash.
I can't believe we haven't, after what we did to the cartographers last week. I'm surprised anybody wants to talk to us at all. But Uncle Dan has a guest, a returning guest for us.
A returning champion,
yes,
as
indeed.
they say in pugilism.
Fellas, one of our returning guests that we had on quite a bit at the beginning of the show has come back to us. Professor Jim, welcome back.
Very good to be back, uncles.
It's been so long. Like, you are like Halley's Comet. You just, every 60 years, whether we need it or not, here you come, inbound with some truth.
Yes, I'm at my best infrequently.
Yes, I feel that.
Can we get me like a Steve Martin 5 times on the show smoking
totally.
jacket?
Yeah, I think that you probably are, right? You've probably done 5 times.
At least. Devoted listeners will remember Professor Jim as a philosophy professor who has come on and talked to us about all kinds of logical fallacies to look out for in the world. But we're not going to do fallacious talk today. Well, I mean, I probably will, but Jim won't. Today, what we're going to talk about
is fellatio.
Conspiracies, fellatio conspiracy.
That is also a fallacy. You're right. Jim, one of the things that you have followed for quite a while in your career is conspiracies.
That's true.
And the ways that they sort of permeate through society and how that happens, why that happens. And lately,
business is good.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because this whole episode, the theme of credulousness has been kind of
strong. Yeah.
So let's talk about, the big one right now, the thing that's happening right now is that half the country seems to think that, there's this global pandemic that is just wrecking populations and has really disrupted the way all of our lives have operated. And the other half seems to think that we're all idiots for believing that that's the case and nothing's going on and there aren't any vaccines. And it's just a bizarro world of completely differing belief systems.
Indeed.
How did this happen?
Yeah.
And it follows pretty, clear political lines, right?
Right.
Which is no coincidence.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So where do you want to take it?
Well, we talked about the anti-vax movement on an episode a few weeks ago, but this is bigger than just sort of anti-vax. Mm-hmm. This is a deep-seated conspiracy that people are following with a religious fervor. You look at any comment section in any local newspaper will talk about anything. We'll publish the word vaccine in any context, and you're going to find people screaming about COVID's not real. The vaccines are, and of course, if it gets really crazy, people are talking about Bill Gates creating the vaccine with a microchip that's going to activate your central nervous system's G5 to make you whatever. How did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good place to start is just to appreciate the range of the conspiracies that are out there, because it gives you a sense of just how all over the place this is. As you mentioned, Dan, there's the sort of Bill Gates is trying to implant a microchip version, more popular over in Britain, but we got sort of inklings of it over here. Was the 5G cell towers were somehow behind it.
Right.
That was popular towards the beginning. Also there was a viral YouTube video called Plandemic that was circulating
it's
a year ago. Yeah, which is all about.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that one. I was going to say, that one. That's all about hydroxychloroquine and
and how
masks,
the federal government is behind it.
Masks cause disease. Just a disaster.
Yeah. So, I would put at sort of the extreme end of, you're doubting the very, nature of the pandemic itself. But even short of that, right? I mean, I think there's lots of, lots of reasons that people, are disinclined to, whether it's stay 6 feet apart or, wear a mask or get a vaccine. And it just sort of, stems from a kind of individualism, I'm going to take care of myself. Y'all take care of yourself. This can't be that bad. I'm healthy. It's just a mentality that in most times you can sort of kind of get away with, but in a pandemic, it's devastating.
And that is that a particularly, it feels like it's a particularly American thing, this sort of Ayn Rand sensibility that like this almost lethal amount of, I'm not a part of society. I am an island unto myself and I can do whatever the fuck I want. And the rest of you it's on you to take care of yourselves. Is that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of variation. You can sort of find versions of it in other countries, and likewise, even within the United States, right? The sort of popularity of that mentality, kind of varies. I think,
right.
Living in the kind of Intermountain West, it's sort of particularly built into the fabric of a kind of libertarian ethos, and so it runs high, in this region.
Yeah. So, in your study of conspiracy theories, you've found that there are sort of threads that permeate all of them. Things, reasons why they catch on, reasons why people latch onto them and hold onto them. What are some of the common threads for just conspiracy theories that apply here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a pandemic is really a sort of worst case scenario for conspiracy theorizing. It's a perfect storm. One of those themes I think you see over and over again is distrust, right? I mean, most conspiracy theories are born in some sense of distrust. And when you look at what people are actually drawn to, when people are sharing, where they're commenting about, about Bill Gates and microchips or David Icke and, 5G towers, the chances that those people really believe that's what's happening, I think are much lower than the chance that what they really believe is just they don't believe the official government story. And whether we're talking about like the assassination of JFK or what happened on 9/11, distrust is at the heart of it. With the pandemic, what's so, problematic is so much of public health relies on trust, right? When you sort of go into the supermarket, you're trusting that everybody in there, is playing by the rules of the sign outside that says "Don't come in if you have any of these symptoms," right? Or right. You're playing by the sense of if you're going to go to a gathering and everybody says they're going to wear a mask and they're feeling fine, is going to wear a mask and they're feeling fine, and we take a vaccine because we're told that, the companies that have made it, have tested it. The FDA has approved it. It's got this sort of success rate. And so you trust that data, right? And so much of the last year of our lives has ramped up our need to trust others. And so if you're disinclined to trust, right, and people who are drawn to conspiracy theories this is just, it's a breeding ground for all sorts of things to take over to fill the gap that you don't believe.
Well, my question to that would be, you're absolutely right. There's so much trust we place in entities, organizations, people that we'll never see all the time. And we all do it when we drive in a car. The engine's not going to explode. The traffic lights are going to work correctly when we buy food.
When we get on a plane. Yeah,
we get on a plane. With this plane has been rigorously tested. The pilot knows what he or she is doing.
Yep. When
you buy food, that your meat has been processed properly, it's not going to kill you.
Yes.
Why does that trust that we all express, no matter what your conspiracy is, truly stop extending to things like public health or? What is there any rhyme or reason to where these, conspiracy theorists decide to not extend the bubble of their trust and where they do?
Well, I think with a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, a lot of it's just inconvenience, right? I mean, you sort of trust the plane because you got to get somewhere. You trust the stoplights working because you need to make it to work. Right. I think it is very clear that this pandemic has been, in addition to requiring great amount of trust, it's been extremely disorienting, even for the people who are very well off, right? If you sort of have a reliable income, you didn't lose your job, nobody in your family died, it's still been turned our lives upside down, and I think a lot of people are retaliating against that in any way they can. And so, the thought that sort of Anthony Fauci is going to tell me I need to wear a mask, or somebody's going to tell me that I need to keep 6 feet apart from somebody else. I think it's kind of people are trying to dig their heels in wherever they feel like they can.
It's so interesting because people are, I think you've hit it. Like, this is taking an emotional toll on all of us. And I get the idea, the sense that like you want something or someone to lash out at, and viruses are notoriously bad to yell at.
Right.
Like you cannot scream. You can't make a virus. You can't
talk to their manager, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've tried.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is interesting the thinking of this as a lashing out against the situation, or as a way of sort of managing a bad way,
regaining control,
a way of managing feelings and that lack of control. Yeah. Interesting.
And I do think, one thing to keep in mind here is if you are encountering people that are sort of expressing these inclinations, whether it's on social media or, coworkers or loved ones, I think it's worth being attuned to where they're coming from, right? If you've got sort of like, crazy Aunt Nancy, right, who sort of is convinced that the JFK assassination was done by, LBJ, and 9/11 was an inside job, and now this one comes along and it's Bill Gates and microchips, you're probably not going to make much headway with her. But I think there is, a wide swath of our fellow, citizens who have their lives have been turned upside down. They've either lost a job or lost a loved one. They are lashing out and looking for someone to blame this on. And those people, I do think you're more likely to be able to find that a kind of a reasonable conversation could make some headway there, because these aren't people who are sort of necessarily inclined to this. They might have just sort of found their way to it because they're at a low spot in their life, as so many people are right now.
Do you have advice for how to talk to those people? For what works in terms of getting through to someone who has been misinformed, who maybe they saw a pandemic, or maybe somebody sent them a link somewhere that looks legitimate enough to them, and they just don't know what is real at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing you want to do is you could start just by saying that you believe in conspiracy theories, right? Because one easy thing to do is sort of fall in the trap of, and these probably, if they're heading in that direction, they might have been sort of written off as a conspiracy theorist. But 9/11 was a conspiracy theory. It was, if even the official version was, right, it was a sort of conspiracy theory successfully borne out by Osama bin Laden, right? The Iran-Contra affair and Reagan was a conspiracy theory. Watergate was a conspiracy theory. All these sort of famous episodes from history start out being called conspiracy theories, and then some investigative journalism typically reveals them to be what they are, right? And oftentimes people win Nobel Prizes or Pulitzer Prizes for doing that sort of reporting. And so if you can sort of say like, I mean, I get that, I don't always trust the government either. You take that off the table, and then you can just sort of talk about like, okay, who are some reliable sources of information? Do you trust ER docs? Do you trust data from a nonprofit, right? And then you can try to figure out what it is that they do trust, and see what sort of resources are available for having a conversation. Because if you can pull it back from the fringe and just talk about what the kind of facts of public health are, why we trust the people we trust now, public health experts, as opposed to, vets when our cats are sick, or mechanics when our cars aren't working. You can see that, this situation isn't all that unusual. It's just that it's so much more serious because it's life and death.
Right.
Well, do you feel like? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's always been interesting to me that we center all of these discussions just around our own country. Because, okay, let's say that you don't trust the current administration or the last administration. There's countries all over the world that are also dealing with this pandemic, and they've all come to a certain conclusion. Mm-hmm. So you can point to that and just say, fine, if you don't trust this government, let's look at what other governments.
Yeah, look at New Zealand, look at Vietnam, and then look at Brazil. There's two countries that are enormous success stories, yes. And then there's one that is a bigger total train wreck than we are.
Yeah, that's right. And the things that these successful countries are implementing, and the activities that the unsuccessful countries are implementing, they're the same wherever you go, right? I mean, you sort of either got people that are playing by the public health rules, or you've got people that aren't. You've got a top-down leadership that's taking this seriously, or a top-down leadership that's not.
And here's something that I this is probably what your work all pivots around, Jim, but it's so fascinating to me that I know that there's probably a lot of gray area, but it seems to me that the people that are least trusting of government /science /vaccines, et cetera, tend to be more religious, right? So they are willing to accept kind of incredibly absurd claims about life and existence from a pastor or a bishop or something like that, yet are comfortable completely rejecting evidence-based, information, which is kind of insane to me. That those are the people demanding to know. Well, I don't know what's in the vaccine. I don't know, like you can read what's in the vaccine. If you're not a chemist or an immunologist, it's not going to make any sense to you. But it's so bizarre that they are willing to accept all of these truth claims with no evidence whatsoever. And all the evidence in the world can't convince them that they should wear a mask. Yeah. No, I think that's such a great point, Mark. I mean, one thing I'll say is,
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Don't do that. Don't.
Sorry, Doug.
Not a good idea. I told you guys I was his favorite.
I don't remember what we were talking about. So that's one reason, that lots of public health efforts have tried to bring in, religious, leaders. Right. And, sports stars, right? Because you are trying to turn to the people that you sort of, to co-opt the people that people trust in this effort. Right. But I think, to your more specific point, Mark, about the relationship between sort of conspiratorial thinking and religious thinking, they do share, right? In both cases, they give a very neat world order, right? There's a sort of, there's good and there's evil. There are, what happens that is bad happens because powerful people or powerful entities did that to be bad. The way to combat it is to individually sort of take a stand. There's no ambiguity or gray area. It's just about, sort of knowing which side you're on. And so I think conspiracy theories feed that. It's perfect in that way, Doug.
I think that's fascinating because when you think about it from that perspective, all religion is basically conspiracy theory. It's an explanation of the world without evidence.
One of the sort of early articles on sort of thinking about conspiracy theories as a philosophical problem sort of equated them to, like the Roman and Greek gods, where, in the same way that these ancient people appealed to, why did an earthquake happen or a pandemic happen, or, why did my lover leave me? You appeal to this sort of, higher, it was because Zeus felt this way, or got in an argument with Athena, or, there's these higher levels that, and they're the puppet masters that are bringing about events here on Earth. And conspiracy theory is, it's the same version of that, but instead of Zeus, it's Bill Gates, and instead of Athena, it's, Anthony Fauci.
Interesting.
Right. So, anti-vax has been around for a while.
Sure.
The kind of modern iteration of it's been around for a decade or so, or more. But did you, in kind of watching what's happening now, QAnon is obviously a new phenomenon. But it, like all conspiracy theories, these things just kind of morph into each other.
Totally.
Like it's really hard to find the lines between.
They're very plastic, right?
Yeah. You could never really find the moment where anti-vax ends and QAnon begins.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel like because of that, the prevalence of QAnon and then the administration of Donald Trump, would you definitely winked and nodded towards all these conspiracies, that this is a kind of a new, more dangerous variant of anti-vax, or is this just kind of the classic anti-vax conspiracy we're dealing with here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's both reasons, Doug, to be sort of profoundly concerned, and also reasons in this particular case to think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So the reasons for concern are, you're right, with a pandemic, again, if you think of conspiracy theories as beginning with distrust, then when you're looking at what draws people to conspiracy theories, it's who do they distrust? And so typically conservative-minded people who distrust the federal government, their conspiracy theories are all about, in some way or another, how the federal government is lying to you or misleading you in some way. More liberal-minded folks tend to distrust capitalism, corporations, private industry. And so they're more inclined to distrust, think of things like, anti-GMOs. That's much more common on the left than it is on the right. Anti-vax, typically it has been, it's common on the left in a way that, many conspiracy theories aren't. And usually that's tied to distrust of, Monsanto with GMOs, or tied to Pfizer or the makers of the vaccines. And so, right, what makes a pandemic so, again, a kind of perfect storm is because, we've got to rely on the public health experts to tell us what to do. That's basically the federal government. And so if you don't trust the federal government, you've got a problem. And at the end of the day, you need to get the vaccine, and that requires relying on big pharma, and some people aren't comfortable doing that. And so I think, QAnon and the anti-vaxxers, it has sort of morphed over the last year because it's just become this kind of catch-all for anything that you distrust, right? I mean, sort of, if QAnon is just, if you distrust the kind of official version out there, whoever it's coming from or whatever it is, QAnon is a safe space to absorb that. I can now tell you the reason we might be optimistic, but I've been talking a while, so I'm also
please. I mean, don't stop before the.
Are we overdue for a little good news?
The fact is that it may be off-brand for us to talk about something that's positive and like why we could be optimistic, but let's do it anyway, for God's sake.
Yeah, Jim, the show's taken a real dark turn in the past year for some reason.
Let's sprinkle a little good news in there. So here's one reason I think we should be optimistic. When you look at a lot of conspiracy theories, ones that we've talked about, like 9/11, JFK assassination, right? Moon landing. In many cases, conspiracy theories, they emerge around sort of one-off historical events, right? Usually something major,
kind of a black swan event.
Something really bad happened, and then your ability to actually sort of probe that in any kind of scientific way is limited, right? I mean, like once 9/11 happened, it happened. And obviously you can go back and, weed through the rubble and piece through, national intelligence information about sort of how the events came about. But it's not like you can, re-simulate it or kind of, try it again. People that were, involved aren't around anymore. And so you are limited in your extent to actually kind of experiment on the thing in question. Right. Whereas with the pandemic that we're all, this sort of slow train wreck that we're all living through, a lot of these claims that the conspiracy theorists are making are testable in real time, so these vaccines are implanting a microchip in all of us. Well, millions of people now have the vaccine. So
millions
you
of
could test
people
that.
now have a free microchip. I don't
That's
see
right.
a downside.
Worst case scenario, you've got a free microchip out of it.
In case I get lost, then they take me to the vet and they can get me back home.
We scanned Mark and found him.
Yeah.
So right, but more likely, what's going to happen? You can get a full body scan, and it's just not going to turn up, right? All these sort of concerns about the vaccine is going to brainwash people or have all these horrific side effects. More and more people are getting vaccinated. More and more people now are vaccinated themselves or know somebody who was vaccinated, and so a lot of the steam just sort of runs out of it because it becomes clear that these claims didn't hold up to scrutiny, right? I mean, you pin it on 5G cell towers. Well, let's just look at where the 5G cell towers are and where the infections are, and then you quickly realize, it doesn't hold up to any scrutiny. And so, I don't think that conspiratorial thinking is going to go away, but I do think, in the not too distant future, we're not going to be talking about microchips and vaccines because it's just going to have proven itself to be a ridiculous idea.
Well, it's really funny that you say that because the segment that is just before this is Uncle Doug did a great piece on the Bermuda Triangle and how, that was the thing.
Sure.
In the 70s, like everybody just is like, yeah, the Bermuda Triangle, that's a thing. And 10 years later, 15 years later, it just was completely gone from the zeitgeist. Like, it's
and not because of anyone's effort. It fell out of fashion and favor and just went away.
Yeah, it didn't have the momentum.
Right.
And I think, what happened? Well, ships keep sailing through there and planes keep flying there and they turn out just fine. And so it's like, all right, well, maybe there's not so much going on. But obviously, right, the people who were promoting that idea at the time and the people who, the kind of David Icke of the world, he's a big British conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Who are promoting the, Bill Gates microchip idea, it's not like they issue a retraction, right? They don't say, "Oh, sorry about that. We got that one wrong."
They just change the subject.
That's right. They just gravitate to the next thing that they want to focus on distrusting.
Right.
Well, I get. Is the thing just that humans are broken? Are we? Is that what's happening right now? Is that just we're bad? We're so bad at brain that we can't brain. Is that it? It's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I think the inclinations that conspiratorial thinking draw out are present in all of us. Right? I mean, a sense of distrust. I think a sense of kind of individualism. We all have that. You just have to kind of either learn how to temper it, figure out ways to absorb information that challenges you, but that stuff's hard. It doesn't come natural, right? I mean, it's way more easy just to sort of fill your Facebook feed with people who believe what you believe and are going to feed you information that confirms what you already think, and the Facebook feed is designed to do that, to keep you there.
Right.
So I think it's humans in general, we bump into all sorts of situations where we no longer are very good at reasoning through what's actually happening, and there are ways out of it, but it takes work, and not everybody's sort of up for that.
Yeah, well, I don't think I find myself in that category. I don't really believe in any conspiracies. I am 100% certain, and I have the facts to show it, that Milli Vanilli was framed. But other than that, like we did talk on the show a few weeks back about how given what it's going to take to get us to herd immunity, not just in our own country or community, but globally, that a lot of these people who kind of reflexively say they're anti-vax or they don't know enough, or they're dubious about the vaccine at this stage. Some of them are going to have to come over to our side, or we're never going to get to herd immunity. Mm-hmm. So we've got to, unlike a lot of conspiracies, like if someone believes in Kennedy was killed by LBJ,
do your thing.
Who cares? Yeah. But this one matters, when we've got to get people onto this side somehow.
Yeah. And I mean, I would hope, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll say about what's important about what you're bringing up there, Doug, is it's not like it's just in the general population. It turns out when the vaccines were being rolled out, sort of in phase one to healthcare workers, about a quarter of healthcare workers refused it. Right.
That
So these are
stunned-
people
that
in the
stunned me.
healthcare, in the healthcare industry. You're sort of like, this is their jam.
And they're vulnerable. They're exposed more than you and I are.
That's why they're phase one, right?
Yeah.
And yet they were like, nah, you know what? I'm gonna wait a little bit and see how this goes. And so, I think to Doug's point, like obviously, I don't think you're gonna, if these people are genuinely worried about like microchips, they're not gonna come over to our side. But I do think there's probably a sizable portion who are in a kind of like, I don't know about this. They're waiting to see what their friends on social media who have got vaccinated say about it after the fact. They're waiting to see, because it's really only now, right? We're sort of just like a week or so into it rolling out generally. And I'd like to think that as that sort of starts happening and there's just this kind of, it becomes just, oh, of course you get vaccinated. It's how you return to normal life, or you start to see the things that you can do when you're vaccinated that you can't do when you're not vaccinated. That there's going to be a gradual migration, right? But again, it's not going to be. People aren't going to say, "Oh, I got that whole 5G thing wrong." They're just going to sort of do it quietly and go about their life.
So what you're saying is what we should do is gently sort of, well, we talked about this a little bit in our patrons only conversation, I think, but it is a good idea to like go onto your social media, talk about, normalize the getting of the vaccine, talk about, what happened. I'm so glad I got it, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
I'm seeing that all over my feed, but I think it's a good idea to make sure that you go into your Twitters and your you faces and whatever, and make sure that you say that and just put a good spin on it.
Because there could be people, right, for whom they're not encountering that information anywhere but on social media, right? And so it really, there's something about, right, again, public health, you're right, they're turning to church leaders and, LeBron James and, the people that people trust. Lots of people trust, you guys, and believe it or not, and lots of people trust your listeners, right? And so when somebody has that personal connection, right, and you can say, hey, I did this, right? People are going to say, oh, I know Dan, right? Doug said he did it. I wasn't thinking about that, but now maybe it seems totally reasonable. Right. Mark's fingers didn't fall off afterwards, right? So I think there's
not all of them.
That's right. And you can get by with the ones that you've got.
Yeah, 6 is a good number.
So I think there is real value in that, Dan.
I've got even a better idea. Based on what you're saying, Jim, is I think what we do is we cook up an even more batshit conspiracy theory to give these people cover to move on from anti-vax and into that one. You know what I'm saying?
That.
They just walk away from it. So
because there's bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. So I just think that we say that Stanley Kubrick faked JFK.
Okay.
Entirely as a human being. And then they can just move on to that.
He was a CGI.
He did it from his control center in the Bermuda Triangle.
That's right.
I think it's obvious. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think
it should provide the cover we need.
And we can get Milli Vanilli to score the entire documentary.
Guys, we've licked this.
I think we got it. Jim, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about this. We all still have plenty of questions, but we've taken up plenty of your time. So we really appreciate you coming out. This is fun.
It was my pleasure, and I'll see you guys again in 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
Perfect.
Right on schedule.
On your next orbit. All right. Thanks, Jim.
Take it easy, fellas.